out, but she's been through some stuff. Taking care of her husband, good care, excellent care. And now she's here.
Let us bow. Holy Father, we thank you for your creation and that we are here. We know we're not worthy of even coming in your presence, but thank you for receiving us. And when you receive us, you still do great things. We pray that we were successful in our travels, and we always ask, traveling without accident or incident, and you have us here. And now as we are at this convention, oh God, would you fill our minds and our hearts with all types of information, all types of experiences, and all types of learning, whereas we may go and impart this to a hungry world, because you told us to go ye therefore and be disciples. Take care of us, and when this is done, return us to our local destinations without hurt or harm. We're going to praise you forever. It's in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Sandy, please. Thank you, Dr. Somerville. And for you who don't know, this Dean is Dr. Reese. He's done a Herculean job since the other dean. Don't pay him. He just cuts up. He just cuts up all the time. Don't pay him a bit of attention. We're just so grateful to be back here this year to do whatever we need to do to spread the word about this gospel music workshop. This is a great organization that was begun in '67. The idea was born. I think the first convention was held in '68, and we've been going ever since. This is the 50th year. You just don't get this far with people and stuff like this. Started with a handful of my mother and a few other people, and Reverend Cleveland got it all together and got it up and running. If he was conscious now of what was going on, he'd probably be dancing in the streets. Because
50 years later.
Yeah, 50 years, and I give him 50 years, and here we are. Here we are, right here. But we're just glad to be here. We're glad you took the time out to come. And we call her Sandy. She's Reverend Sandra Rose. That's her name. Everybody calls her Sandy. And she's just a repository of knowledge because she was in this thing as a child growing up. And she's not but 50. Ooh, let me step back. You know what I said? Let me step back. I don't want to get struck.
No, but you don't want to get struck.
Well, I have to be at least 50.
Have to be at least 50.
At least. If I say I was at the first convention, I have to be at least.
You served on the youth division?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Well, you know, at then there was no youth division. It was just
Just come,
Everybody
y'all come.
together.
Y'all
didn't
come.
just come together. They
And
didn't know
things,
who
they
was
kept
on.
adding on, growing. This gentleman here, I would have to make mention, and he was in our class. He's all the way from, I say Ichihara, because that's my city's sister city in Japan. Mobile, Alabama's sister city, Ichihara. But where are you from exactly now? Tell us again. Where are you
Japan,
from?
Nagoya.
In Tokyo. I mean, in Japan.
Nagoya.
What's the town, city?
In Tokyo and Osaka, between Nagoya. This Nagoya is
Nagoya?
very famous. Is Toyota company. The headquarters is Nagoya.
Nagoya and Tokyo. For those of you who were here yesterday, his choir was on stage yesterday. They couldn't get to, and they can sing.
Yeah, they cleaned up. Buddy.
Whenever they sing, you got to be there to hear them. If you haven't heard them, you got to hear them. They are
Lord, I'm
very
available
good.
to you, is what they say.
Yeah.
Maybe Wednesday night with you.
Yes.
So,
They get all involved. It's not just yak. They're involved in it. I want to believe that they're feeling it, so
Yes.
they're available. But anyway, they're good. But all of you got something special, and for a week is out, we're trying to learn about what it is, and we want to know how the workshop affected you at the end of the week. So get ready. We're gonna ask you. Now, Sandy's gonna give out a lot of stuff, and let me tell you who all's coming. We usually have guest people. We got one person, and Mom, you on stage yesterday?
Yeah, she was on stage.
How many of you, Reverend Norma Jean Pender? She was on stage yesterday, sitting over to the left. Yeah, and Norma Jean Pender.
Reverend Mother.
We call her Reverend Mother. She's on the air in Detroit. Reverend Mother got talk. She's girlfriend of truck drivers and everybody. They all know her. Wait.
Yeah, she was at communion. I think she spoke earlier. I went out
Yes,
home and she did speak.
she was the lady that narrated the song when Philadelphia came in. She stepped to the mic over on the right. She had a little challenge this year. The old devil tried to whoop a stroke on her, but she jumped right. She sprung right back up and Sandy brought her here. And I'm just so glad to say I just love her to death. She'd be mean as hell sometimes. But I just love her to death. She's really a sweet lady. I think she means Jesus all the way. We all better. But anyway, Sandy, would you like to have a few remarks?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. As he said, my name is Sandra Rose, and I am from Detroit. And Detroit is the birthplace of Gospel Music Workshop. I know they got up yesterday and said Philadelphia, and everybody from Detroit was like, touch the pearls. But it is Detroit. And as he said, my mother was a part of the committee. She was the first secretary, a part of the committee that helped to form the workshop. Reverend Mother her and Reverend Cleveland were fast friends. So they were just, these were all young people, and they were all just hanging out together. So these weren't a bunch of older people who knew what they were doing, who had started conventions before. No. They loved the Lord, they were in gospel music, they loved gospel music, and they all hung out together. And back then, I guess before cell phones and all of this other communications, people wanted to be with each other.
Yes.
Now, not so much, but back then, we were all just, what time we gonna meet? What time we gonna meet? And then we had meeting spots. Instead of, you getting on the phone calling somebody. There was Elma and Carl's House of Music in Detroit, which Elma Hendricks Parham and her husband helped form. And that was one of the spots, and it was a publishing company. So if you look at a lot of the older music, you'll see Elma and Carl's. She published quite a bit of music. She was also the first female that was on the board of directors. But they would meet in that record store. Everybody, just Donald Bells, everybody would just go to the record store because that's where we hung out because we liked gospel music. So you go down there and thumb through the albums, and then some of the older people would be over talking, and some of the younger people be like, see, I get out of grown folks' business.
Yeah.
What y'all talking about? So that's how we got a lot of this information. And I don't know if you all had an opportunity to get the commemorative book. The commemorative book, I happen to have, I laid it out for you. But some of the history, and I had to take some of it out because more people, all the chapters want to be represented in the book. So some of the history pages I took out. But I'm doing another book, so. What I'm going to do this week is to walk through some of the pictures that are the historical pictures that are in the book, some of the board of directors, the first board of directors, like yesterday, only one that's left from the original board of directors is James Ford. James Ford, and he's been with the convention. He's from Philadelphia. He'll be here this week to talk. And I have some footage of him and Reverend Mother going over some stories, and you'll laugh. It's funny. So we'll show that later on this week. We have that. And again, I'm going to bring some of the pictures to show you and give you some insight on some of the characters who helped start the convention and how they work. And again, this convention was not planned. It was not like now you have to go and get a 501c3 and we have to organize and we have to formally do this. A lot of that was done, they was winging it, you know? And so it was like, oh, okay, so we get so far, we do this. And then they started adding people in, like Ed Smith. Ed Smith was the business manager for Harold Smith and Majestic. I'll give you some of that information. And he was a businessman. He owned a flower shop. At first he started with Stinson's Funeral Home in Detroit, and which was Diggs. I don't know if anybody remembers. He used to be a congressman, Charles Diggs. And then they had a family funeral home business, which was the House of Diggs. And Stinson's was there. Mr. Stinson, he didn't know anything about gospel music, and he didn't know how much he supported gospel music. But we used his funeral home was hooked to the flower shop. Ed ended up buying the flower shop from Mr. Stinson's. He worked there as a mortician, and he bought the flower shop. Well, once he bought the flower shop, all the young people would just hang out at the flower shop. It was Harold Smith and the Majestics, you know, and we just would go up there again because that was the place to go. We didn't hang out at the stores. We didn't hang out at the bars or anything like that. We like to be around people in gospel music, so that's what we did.
That song that they sang yesterday.
Lord help me to hold out.
The one that you session in on. We on our way. Jordan. Somebody said George Jordan.
George Jordan is from, I have a picture with him. Let me make sure I'll bring that. I have a picture I took with him at Iris's house. He wrote many songs, and the Detroit and Chicago connection, as far as gospel music is concerned, we were trading people back and forth. Reverend Cleveland is originally from Chicago,
Right.
but Reverend Charles Cleveland, II, he was from St. Louis. He came up to Detroit. I'll bring you some pictures of him. He came up to Detroit to be with Reverend Lofton. And Reverend James Lofton had one of the first mega churches pretty much anywhere. They would march in, and I'll bring you a picture of them. They would march in on Sunday with $1 in their hand. And it was a 500 voice choir. And they march in on Sundays, and Reverend Craig was over the choir. And they come in, I'll show you a picture, and you'd be like, that was their church service?
That's the first church that got from holding the hand and marching.
Well, and First Church of Deliverance and Charles Craig ended up breaking off from Reverend Lofton and starting his own church. And he started the church called Prayer Tabernacle. And I have a history on YouTube of Prayer Tabernacle, and I'll show you the history. We just want to make sure we get in and hit some of the hot spots today and let you know when we come in what'll be on the screen. So we probably need to, it's a lot of information, so we probably need to start.
Pick up stuff back here too. They're putting it out. They were gonna put it out yesterday. This is the world's only traveling library. And it used to be much more stuff. They condensed a lot of it now. All that stuff you see on those little dots, so that those used to be big old pictures that would cover this whole, like here, they brought this, a lot of this stuff down, they reduced it. So you can see it, and you don't have to walk a mile around here to see it. You can just grab it all at once. It's whatever whatever if we don't have it, we can get it. And that's
And
the librarian there with the rust colored shirt on.
they have I see they have a dry erase board, but these are some of the things that I'm taking notes of some of the things that we will be seeing presentations on the screen.
Carol, do you have an archive of historical stuff? I found the box of records someone threw out. Huge 33 RPM GMWA from many, many years ago that I'd like from Portland, Oregon. It was my first year here. But I'd like to donate it to someone.
Yes, you can.
There's the man,
Yeah.
right? Al, excuse me, Robert. Excuse me.
I can find out later. I just want to know.
Yes.
It's back
Oh,
in
yes.
Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
wanted-
But I would love to.
I wanted to make
And
that.
we'll, yeah,
Are you still receiving donations? She said she has.
for the archive.
A huge album of GMWA on 33 RPM. Record that big.
Really?
Yes, I'd love to donate it.
Okay. How y'all doing?
She's gonna come in. She get with you on
just
that.
come
Okay.
and I'll
Thank
All
you.
right. And I'll look for you then?
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, he'll
He's
be
good
in
at
here.
conserving stuff.
But going back to Reverend Lofton and Charles Craig the second, there were many Charles Craigs. I just ran into Charles Craig the fifth upstairs. So the Charles Craig the second, or Charles Craig Jr., formed Prayer Tabernacle. He split from Reverend Lofton. And I thought it was immediately, but it wasn't. It wasn't immediately. It was. It took about almost a year for them to form the church. And he said that the Lord called him to start Prayer Tabernacle Church. So he started Prayer Tabernacle on October 4th, 1958, and in Detroit. And they had a choir. He was a masterful choir. And if you notice back then, there wasn't a lot of choirs, you know, back in the 50s, unless you sang like Wings Over Jordan, that kind of thing. There wasn't gospel choirs. That was, people did quartet kind of stuff, and you know, they didn't do choirs. Reverend Craig came out with a unique form of music, and it had a lot of syncopated rhythms. If you listen to Child of the King, it's a child love the king, child love the king. You know, and the choir, different parts would do different things. The sopranos, Hughley Jean Hurley, when they recorded, they would have their own mics. I mean, you know, so, which was unheard of. He formed this choir, and it was 150 voices. He had a friend, Reverend James Cleveland. He wasn't Reverend yet, but he was James Cleveland. He was in Chicago. So as the story goes, my godfather told me that he was the one that was sent to Chicago to go pick up Reverend Cleveland, because he was playing for Albertina Walker in the Caribbean. You know, so that was all he was known for. We did an interview with Sister Albertina, and Reverend Mother did, and she was talking to her. And one thing that she said that I really noticed, she said, my record label, I asked my record label to record Cleveland, and they said, he can't sing. We don't want it. And she said, but he's good. We don't want it. And she said, I'm so glad that they lived long enough to see him become the king of gospel and to see what they passed up. Okay, so to see what they passed up. So at this time, Reverend Cleveland was at a low spot. You know, he wasn't the king of gospel. He was just playing the piano. So Reverend Craig sent over, there was always a fellowship between First Church of Deliverance and Prayer Tabernacle, always a fellowship. And First Church of Deliverance is in Chicago. So there was always a fellowship. He sent over to Chicago to bring Reverend Cleveland back to become the first minister of music at Prayer Tabernacle. So Reverend Craig was a pastor. Although he was all about music and choirs, he was a pastor. And Reverend Cleveland was the minister of music. So together, they would have concerts. And they had an Easter concert one year, and I think that was like 62, 61. they had an Easter concert, and this lady named Carmen Murphy, who owned a beauty shop in Detroit, and it was called the House of Beauty. She owned a beauty shop, and it was for black women. And she started a line of cosmetics because back then, black women couldn't get cosmetics. They only had them in the shades of other people. They didn't have our shades. And you know, we come in a myriad of shades. So she started blending makeup. So it was called Carmen Makeup, and I remember the guy used to come around, Mr. Raspberry, and he would have his case and go to different beauty salons, and he would come to your house and bring your makeup, you know, and you know, they'd have because all the black women had the little pink case of makeup. And Miss Murphy went to the concert one day. She used to record some of the local people, you know, in the basement of the record studio of one of her salons. And she came to a concert and she was like, my God, who are these people? And he was like, well, we's a choir, man. You know? So she said, I gotta have them. So she took the choir and she named them. They were the Voices of Tabernacle. She named them the Mighty Voices of Tabernacle. And you may know them by some of the hits, Lord Do It, Something, God Hold Me. I can give you a list of songs, and every one of them, you'd be like, yeah. One right after the other. And I was just amazed to find out that, now that's my church. That was the church I grew up in. I was amazed to find that how they recorded so much in such little time. They were recording albums. It had to be 2-3 a year. They were the first choir to record for Motown. They did they sang behind Marvin Gaye on a tribute to one of the Mary Gordon's sisters when she passed. They had a tribute album and they used them. And these were a bunch of masterful people. And they asked Reverend Craig, Barry Gordon asked them, Reverend Craig asked Barry Gordon, well, why don't you know, take some of my singers and, you know, record them, like Richard Rockmore, who was the man. Okay, everybody loved Richard Rockmore. Huey Jean Wilson, everybody loved him. And he was like, are you kidding? You know, I don't want those people up against me. I only have Diana Ross, you know. These people sing with a whole different kind of something, you know. And he didn't know it was called the anointing. These people, no, can't do that. So he was like, no. Well, they stayed with Miss Murphy, and they had a song called The Love of God. And the love of God is what took Reverend Cleveland over the top. After then, once that record hit, it was pretty much over. He went on a solo career, and he became known as now, you know, like James Cleveland. So the records turned to James Cleveland and the Voices of Tabernacle after that. And Reverend Craig, he didn't mind. All he wanted to do was get his music out, you know. And they were friends as long as we were touring. I was talking to Alonzo Atkins, and some of you may know him. Alonzo Atkins is a little person. And he's back in the day, but we was called him George. But now we, politically correct, we call him Little. But I know he was at the convention last year. I'm going to call and see if he's coming this year. You can see him on like the Blues Brothers. Yeah. He was in Roots, directing choir. And back then, like in the 70s, on some of those movies and stuff, that's the choir that they got. They asked Reverend Cleveland to send us some voices, send us some people. So he would feature a lot of his folks. So you can see Alonzo like on the Blues Brothers. He's just directing.
But she's talking about it. Most of these guys they have, like, in the position of Cleveland land, they don't want you to have, and she just mentioned that, don't send those guys, no. He was a very versatile person. He had his religion, and then there was other stuff. And he used to always say there's joy in serving the Lord. He has all kinds of way, all kinds of expression. You don't get out of the loop, but there's joy inside the loop. So, you know what I mean? And that's what he espoused. He pushed that all the time. Whenever he get up and talk, you don't have to be set up stiff on the board and all like that. You can rejoice in Christ your Savior. And he would tell you that all the time. And I was just listening to her talking about that. My mind got to running back. Because I've been here since 79. When I came to this workshop, it was the 13th anniversary. And I thought that was some years, but when I looked and saw 50, I almost out. Where did they go?
Yeah, where did they go?
Yeah, but she's telling you exactly. He was a progressive person. He wanted to get the message out. He wanted the young people. He loved the young people. He loved the older people that grew up in the workshop. He said, "We're family. We're family."
And I think that he understood that someone gave him a chance, right? And he reciprocated, and almost. And I used to think that every single record, if Reverend Cleveland was on that record, he put Reverend Cleveland presents. You had a hit.
Yeah.
There were some people who didn't quite get hits, but you know,
If they hit, they
yeah,
didn't stay there.
yeah. But or they were one hit wonder.
Got that one thing.
But
It went on.
he was very generous as far as letting people on. Because I was talking to Reverend Mother last night, and it's something when when you've been down and you understand down.
Yes.
You understand no money. You understand being poor. You understand not having anything. And he went from not having anything because he laughed. We were laughing. She said one year, she said, James said, Craig passed out turkeys and gave us a turkey. He said, we didn't even have no oven.
Turkey with no way to cook.
Right, we
No way
got
to
no way to
cook.
cook no turkey. We ain't got no oven. So he went from that to having chefs. So he understood down. And I think he was down way longer than he was up. So he understood.
That cold flat in Chicago to a
Exactly.
mansion in LA.
To a mansion in LA. So he understood down. He was very generous. I remember going over to Charles Davis's house, and Charles Davis was on the board, and I was surprised they didn't put him. But like I said, I'm going to bring the pictures from the book. And Charles Davis was a good friend of Reverend Cleveland in Detroit. And Reverend Cleveland would come and everybody would kind of flock over to Charles Davis' house. Because it was in penitentiary because we knew we was going to eat, But again, as kids, we just wanted to be around, just looking and seeing and, and the older people would be sitting at the table or whatever, talking and laughing, and we just catch some of the stories, But Charles Day at Christmas, everybody that came in the house would get something. Everybody. So, that was Reverend Cleveland's generous spirit. He didn't mind going to the mall. I have a picture that I'll show you that's in the book where Reverend Cleveland went to the store and he bought 10 suits. He had never been able to do that. He had to wear the same suit over and over for many years. He went to the store and was like, I bought 10 suits, at one time. So it was a great upbringing. Well, while he was coming up and once the love of God hit, he went out on his own. But the friendship between him and Reverend Craig never diminished. Reverend Craig still toured with the choir and, Reverend Cleveland would come. And they went to Randall Island. Lonzo told me that there were two choirs. It was a touring choir and a choir that stayed at church. Because this was a church choir, bottom line. Voices Tabernacle was a church choir, and they just happened to do this. And this was one of the first choirs, again, other than like Wings Over Jordan, that went on tour. Nobody was going on tour back then, not whole choirs, you know. Because your church choir, I remember my grandmother's choir, they couldn't even clap their hands. And I would tell my mother, I kind of don't want to go over there, Mama. I like this Craig thing. They had drums, tambourines, what you heard in there yesterday. It was that kind of thing. Drums, tambourines, organ. I mean, a real organ where people could really play the organ. Because you have some people that sit on the organ, and then some people play it. Because my pastor joked, he said, I thought the organ was broke till you got on. He said, I'm about to call the repairman. He said, yeah, there was the Hammond B3.
All them choice.
All of that was not done.
Others wasn't fast enough. It's slow. Pipe of them.
Right, the pipe organs was slow. You can't play bump music. I only saw one guy who could play bump music on a pipe organ, and that was Frank White.
Oh yeah.
Frank White was masterful. We used to call him the chocolate Liberace. He was masterful.
He was a part of this work.
Yeah,
She
he
called
was
him.
part of the workshop.
Everybody she called has been a part of this workshop.
Everybody.
Even Kurt Frank.
What was his name?
His name was Frank White.
He's out of
And
Detroit.
he's on the one of the clips that I showed you, and they have pictures of these people.
She got so much stuff to show you.
And
collect.
yeah, he's on the Prayer Tabernacle video. I did the history of the Voices Tabernacle, so I'll show you that. But he was the chocolate Liberace, and a lot of the instruments were designed for gospel because they didn't have them. They, you know, and so Reverend Craig, I remember in our church we had two organs. One was like a B3, and then another one was like it was Allen, but only one that was Reverend Craig's organ. He was the only one that played that. And when he sat on that organ, he was like, uh-oh, service about to go to a whole nother level. Our service, we would get a concert every Sunday. And as kids, we would just sit in the audience. I had to go to rehearsal with my mom. She was one of the pianists. I would go to rehearsals, and we didn't play and have different things to play with in rehearsal. We had to sit there and listen. So I can tell you every song they ever sang in all four parts. So, I know. As far as the Voices of Tabernacle kept going, Reverend Cleveland ended up going over to Savoy. When he went to Savoy, that was going to New Jersey, and that's how he got to Nutley, New Jersey, with the Reverend Lawrence Roberts. And Reverend Lawrence Roberts worked for Savoy. So when you hear like the Peace Be Stills and all of that, that's how that came in. Right after he left Prayer Tabernacle, he got involved with Savoy and Lawrence Roberts, that connection. Fred at Savoy. That was like back in the 60s.
Fred Mendelsohn was a white fellow.
And we
back on the
had
wall.
one of-
Like, he's a
we
big
had
guy,
this-
not on
yeah.
white fellow with a beard, and he came to talk to each other like dogs. They could talk back and forth to each other, and they might have even cussed. I just didn't hear it. But they talked to each other like that, and then he advised him. He advised him, and they were for this. Well, you know, this workshop has been, I know, integrated for the last 40 years. Cause
from its inception,
yeah,
really.
Yeah.
Because we had white people in the Voices of Tabernacle. I remember Joe McDuffie, Nurse Mary. They were all we had. Yeah, but we had all kinds of people. So Fred Henderson, like he said, was with Savoy, and he ended up doing quite a bit. He ended up being on the board of directors for the Gospel Music Workshop. But there were a lot of connections that was fostered at that time, and him being in New Jersey and really, and that's when people were buying records, gospel people were buying records, because back then, you know, you would only get to, you know, Tutti Frutti, Old Rudy, and the kids was buying, you know, like maybe 45s or whatever, and you had to have a lot to be on the 33. You know, you could sell a 45, but the record companies weren't so apt to they weren't so apt to give you a whole album, because you had to sell a whole album. And back then we weren't skipping tracks. When you put it on, you land that whole thing, you know. So that's why we knew every song on the album. He went there. And meanwhile, back in Detroit, as the years progressed, in 1968, January 7th, Reverend Craig was asleep in the Lord. So that was a big blow. But before he was asleep, his last concert in October of '67 was called The Bible. Now, let me just digress a little bit. If you know anything about history, in August the 3rd this year, there's a movie coming out called Detroit. And this movie is about the rebellion. I don't like to call it a riot, because riot just means people just went crazy. People went crazy for a reason. And we were rebelling in Detroit against the police brutality, against all the things that were happening. So it wasn't just a riot. We didn't just pick up and say, let's burn this. It built up and built up and built up until people exploded. You know, so that's the way back. So in '67, we were heavily involved in the rebellion. So nothing kind of happened then. In October of '67, Reverend Craig every year would have an annual concert at the big theater in Detroit. It was called Ford Auditorium. And he had the Bible, and he recreated the Bible in song. So he had, you know, songs about the creation, a song about the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and it went all the way to Revelation. And he had, it was maybe, I happen to have the original program book. It was maybe about 15, 20 songs that the choir did. And people would dress up in all their fineries and put on 2 wigs that night. And put that first scarf on, honey, and come on down there. You could hit them in the back with a bright red apple. So they was trying to see who could get closest to the stage. So, and that was the who's who, and you would wait for intermission to go out in the lobby, you know, and see the who's who of the gospel world in the lobby. So he had his last concert then, which was wonderful, critically acclaimed. And in '68, he passed away. So in that program book, I had Reverend Cleveland sent an ad to say, to my Detroit pastor, you know, congratulations, best wishes, love you, much success. And you know, that relationship that they had was still there. So moving on to '68, Reverend Craig passes away, and Reverend Cleveland was in the running for the church. They had 3 people, which was the assistant pastor that was there, Reverend Joseph Wilson, Reverend James Cleveland, and Reverend David Craig, who was Reverend Craig's brother. So 3 of them were in the running. So in March, Reverend Cleveland, you know, the people have been going to the music store, like I said, Hillman Carl's, and talking about, the pastors were saying, well, we can't find, you know, qualified musicians, you know, y'all, they sending this boy over here, and he can't play, he don't know how to, you know, look. And so, Elmer, Reverend Craig, all of them would sit around and say, well, we gotta come up with something to train these people, you know, before, because they would call to Elmer, because she gave lessons as well, to say, would you send me somebody over here, you know, at my church, because the pastors don't know. then they didn't know musicians. They were like, send me somebody, you know, to train my choir. Well, they had to train the musicians. So, and of course, this conversation was not just being held in Detroit. This was happening everywhere. You know, people were needing trained musicians in their churches because after Reverend Dorsey, well, he's not Reverend, but yeah, after Tommy Dorsey came up with this, you know, new gospel, people had to learn it. They had to be trained in it. You just couldn't. My uncle played the upright bass for an orchestra, and he would come to our concert and be like, "I'm just amazed at how you guys can just play and don't have music. You don't have sheet music." Well, I'm like, I don't know, you know, I don't know how we do it. We just do it, you know. So it's like you have to be trained at that. So they couldn't send people that could read, you know, sheet music to say we're gonna sing gospel, because you kind of have to put that little flair in gospel, you know. So they
If you can't feel it, you can't sing
if you can't feel it, you can't sing.
Can I ask a quick question? You had touched on Dr. Dorsey. Was James Cleveland ever a part of that?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
a lot of the histories
Yes.
that I've read and that I've heard, I've seen, they don't really
Yes.
They don't
put him
play
in
it
it.
up, right.
Yeah, they should just Dorsey and then there's Cleveland.
Yes,
You know,
no,
don't
they
have-
were together. And actually, when he got ready to start the gospel music workshop, Reverend Dorsey, I keep calling him Reverend, but I reverence him, you know. But he endorsed it. He said, okay, you know, you guys are, I give you my blessings, you can start it. So they didn't just start it and say, well, you know, we doing our own thing over here like a lot of people do, you know. And they said, no, we're gonna, he endorsed it. So that's why you see the president of the National Choirs and Choruses, she's here. Mostly every year she comes. I don't know why I can't think of her name. Yes, Miss Gentry. She generally comes, you know, and we support, you know, one another. But no, there was support from there.
One year, I wish you guys could have been there. Remember the year in New Orleans, we all sang together.
Is that right?
Yeah, our convention was coming in and they were going out,
Yeah.
Wow.
or vice versa.
And it's always around the
Yeah,
same
and
time.
they somebody stayed over to sing with the other group. God, it was awesome.
I'll bet.
It was a mess up there. I'm telling you. It was awesome.
And so the styles of music are a little different. They're mostly like kind of choral and, you know, that kind of thing. And when you get over to the workshop, it was more of a flair, you know, not theatrical, but you understand what I'm saying? More of a flair to it. So yes, there was a definite, and they were both from Chicago.
Yeah.
And so he did get his blessings before he started. So meanwhile, Reverend Cleveland thought he was going to get Craig Carpenter to be the pastor. So he asked Charles Davis, you know, look for me a house in Detroit, you know, because I'm going to be probably moving back. And so they had the meeting at the London Inn. So he called in a lot of his friends. Being on the road, they didn't go on the road like they go today. They were staying in people's houses. A lot of times, like, he might have stayed in a hotel, maybe, but he kind of liked people's houses. Some people might stay in a hotel, but most of the times you had houses, or if you went to the South, some of the colleges would loan dorms for some of the people to stay in, that kind of thing. So he met people all over this country, gospel singers, from doing tours. So he called some of these people and was like, listen, can y'all meet me in Detroit? And so a lot of them came, the ones that he called the special ones for the board meeting. So there's a hotel, and I have a picture in Detroit called the London Inn. And that's where they had the first board meeting was at the Atlanta meeting. They didn't know it was a board meeting, but, you know, they just, you know, came in.
Huh?
History class.
Yes.
Yes, you can have
I'm
some.
Evangelist Anderson, minister.
Praise God.
Gospel Divine Minister.
Amen. So, he called together some of his friends, which was James Ford, who you saw.
Oh, yes. I saw him yesterday.
Yes, he was one at the original board meeting. And that board meeting was in 1968. Reverend Craig was not there. He was there. Okay. So, that meeting was in 1968 when, that week they had services at Prayer Tabernacle, which was right down the street. So Reverend Nix he wasn't the pastor of St. James, and he just had he was on the choir. So they brought the choir. Prayer Tabernacle was jammed and packed, and they had, you know, like musical services that week.
Where was Prayer Tabernacle?
Where?
Where was it here?
104 Elliott, Detroit, Michigan.
Oh, yeah. I heard
104 Elliott, Detroit, Michigan. So they were there, and so at that time they said, and they got Ed. Ed Smith was the business manager for Harold Smith and Jesse. You heard him sing yesterday, Lord, help me to hold out.
Mm-hmm.
That was recorded by Harold Smith and Jesse. Harold Smith was also the first president of the Gospel Music Workshop. At that point, it was called the Gospel Music Association. He was the first president. Harold's, they met. They said, okay, fine, bring your people. We're gonna meet in that last week in August the 26th. We're gonna meet in Detroit. Okay, Ed, get it together, get the church together, get the places, get some rooms so we can have church. So Reverend Cleveland had the connections, Ed had the business. So Ed kind of got things together, and everybody went back out. Like James Ford, you'll find out, he was a promoter. And so he had like the Philly area locked up. He had that locked up. So he was like, I'll bring the folks from Philly, you know. And then this one here, oh, I'll bring, you know, Lawrence Roberts from there. Or I'll bring, you know, New Jersey. And this one, you know, Albertina Walker. Well, you know, I bring my girls, you know. So Kitty Parham, all of them, they all came. So that last week in August in 1968, it was the first convention. It was August the 26th.
What year was that?
1968. So if you get there's a book, the commemorative book. They got up and announced it yesterday. It's a white book with the cover. If you get that book, the pictures that I'm going to go over, some of the pictures I'll go over will be from that book. So you can have that. And some of the chapters also put their history. And they also put their history in it. So you'll get not only the history of the workshop, but
That's what
also
I'm
the
trying to
history of individual.
Right. Oh, oh, turn it down. I was trying to get this phone to stop. I hope it stops, please, Lord.
Okay.
That's what I was trying to see. I'm not computer literate, and I just got the doggone phone doggone it the other day, and
Yeah.
I just.
And now you can't live with them, and you can't live without
That's
them.
what I heard.
You know,
I'm
so,
just trying to get,
you know, you have to get to learn them. You know, take a little time.
It does.
But that was the first convention. I also put in that book, that white book that you can purchase. Let me tell you, there's a limited edition. They say they almost sold out. That was yesterday. They only printed 500 because I don't think they thought people were gonna, you know. But after I was like, let's put this history in there, and people will get them. And so they was like, you got the first first workshop book in there. You got pictures of, you know, so I put in there, these are some of the people that you can identify by faces, like Kitty Parham.
Yeah.
I got the first program, the actual program sheet of how they ran the convention all week and who was there. One of the people who will also be here this week is Joan Hillsman, who was at the first workshop. And they had classes, and she'll tell her story. I'll let her tell it. But she'll tell about how Dorgan, they were kind of over the classes, and they said, Mrs. Hillman, she was a doctor then. This is what you can do. You can take over the 7 a.m. classes. And she was like, oh, I'm so honored. And she said, I didn't know I had the class because didn't nobody want to get up at 7 a.m. So she was there at the first convention. It was 3,000 people. 3,000.
Do you still have that history book that I can purchase?
Yes, you can get it in the exhibit hall, I think.
Yeah.
Exhibit hall?
Oh,
Yeah.
what a selling t-shirt.
I think they were down to like maybe close to 100. Now after the convention, I'm sure they will do it again, but you'll have to basically order it online, and it'll be a lot more than
There's
$25.
a lot of good pictures and it's great pictures.
Is there a plan to do it, maybe do a DVD?
Yeah. And actually, I got tied up with the book, which I wasn't supposed to do. Nobody told me. And they said, help 'em. And I said, okay, what y'all need? So they said, well, we don't have anything. We just need to do this. And we only have 30 days. So I was like, huh? And I work every day. I'm like, okay. And then I have the choir, and you know, and so I'm like, okay, we'll do this. So we got the book together, and as I was having, because at first I thought I had a whole lot more history pages that I could play with, because at first they only had only about 25 chapters reported in. I said I got 100 pages. So I'm gonna have to fill these pages up. So I started laying them out. And then all of a sudden, we got 10 more ads. We got 20 more ads. We got 20 more chapters. We got 15 more chapters. And I was like having to cut more and more of this history out of the book. So I was able to leave a lot in. It's a list of all of the conventions. It's pictures of Reverend Cleveland, pictures of a lot of the people who are important in the convention, although everybody is some of the important people on the convention. You have a list of all of the board members, where they are, because everybody that served on the board is not dead. No. Now, the original one's the only one that's still alive, and he's still active, is James Ford. But everyone else on the original board,
I did, and Ebenezer.
He's a
He was
something
there
else.
yesterday.
He'll be
He
here,
and
right?
his wife were in
Okay.
the procession.
Honey,
Okay, because he's.
he'll be up in
He's one of our. He'll be in tomorrow.
Yes.
Yes. No,
And I also have, like I said, him on film, and him and Reverend Mother going back and
I
forth.
told her I had to limit him to
Who?
my birthday.
Oh, okay. And she's another one.
Passed away.
Okay, she's another one. And I have an interview with her. It's very extensive. I have probably about 45, 50 interviews with a lot of the gospel people. Just because a lot of times when our history is written, people like to scintillate facts. They don't really care like we do about, what year was this, and how they want to know who they went with, and did they fight, just like the housewives, it's the same thing. And I'm not doing it.
Excuse me. Does anybody have to go to another prayer?
Is it time?
I think they're moving and I see them moving in the hall.
Yeah, it's 10 after. You got another class?
if you have to go to another country, if you choose to go.
Yes, I'm sorry.